I was an atheist for 7 years, and during that time, I had 2 abortions. The girl that I was living with, who got pregnant with my child, who wanted to get married, who begged me to get married, who wanted to have the child, I drove to a building in Lower Manhattan before Roe versus Wade, and she went inside by herself. I didn't look at her. I gave her $100. She walked in the building. She vacuumed away our first child. She came back in the car. There was no conversation. I didn't look at her. We drove away. I said I loved her, but that was the end of our relationship. And I couldn't repair it. I couldn't get the genie back in the bottle. I had done a despicable thing, and I was now going to reap the consequences of it. Ironically, a few months later, she gave me $100 to get on a plane to get out of her life, which I did. I remember meeting one of the girls. I was a postman after a while, and I walked into a store where she was, and she was insisting it was my child, and I was insisting it wasn't, but it was. I just didn't want to deal with it. And when I saw her, I walked in, and I was so embarrassed. I walked out, took a few steps. I'm not even a Christian. I am just a guy delivering mail. I walked back in, and I looked at her, and I said, I am so sorry for what I did to you. And she said thank you with tears coming down her cheeks. And I walked out still feeling like a slob, still feeling like I was a rotten guy, because I was. I wasn't forgiven yet, but I was at least beginning to acknowledge my responsibility. It would then be some 10 years later before I finally had received the Lord and then would fully accept what I had done and the significance of it, and that broke me. I remember the first time I talked about it. I remember how awkward it was, the words coming out of my mouth, a mouth filled with cotton. I felt humiliated. I felt that what I had done was despicable, frankly. I knew now it wasn't insignificant. I knew it wasn't nothing. It is sad to not admit when you've done something horribly wrong, but it's tragic to remain in denial about what you've done. Once your eyes are open, once you understand what it is you have done, even though you're forgiven, and that's true, I am forgiven, I am released, I am healed, but the act took place. I'm not going to minimize the act. I'm not going to make myself feel more comfortable by talking less about it, making it seem as if it wasn't as significant as it was. It was incredibly significant. It was a final act of taking the life of my child. I'm forgiven, but I am now conscious. I am now awake, and I will not be put back to sleep again. In cowardice, I had taken the life of my children, and now in courage, I was standing up to acknowledge that they did exist. The greatest joy in life is being forgiven. Hiding is the tragedy of life. But once you come out of hiding, once you acknowledge, this is what happened, I'm looking at it squarely, and yet I'm completely forgiven. That's where the joy is. It never replaces the reality of what took place, that it was actually a child, but I have taken full responsibility, and now I can receive the forgiveness that God offers and not have to live in some way denying the reality of the event.